Hi guys, welcome back. My name is Jaspreet and today we're going to be glazing. Now, I know and I'm sure you've heard this many times, a lot of us don't like to glaze. I'll tell you why I don't like glazing. I mean, I love the end result once you have the kiln opening, but I don't enjoy glazing so much is because of the overwhelm of deciding what glaze to use. In that sense, I think it's a good idea to have a limited color palette and also have access to limited glazing options or limited glaze brands. I can't imagine what my life would be if I had more than these glaze brands here in Singapore. I would go completely crazy getting all the glazes and trying all the combinations to no end. So I'm kind of glad that I have fewer glaze options. But even these at times turn out to be just too much to handle. There's too many options. Oh, that's why I don't like glazing basically. But before we get started, I wanted to just touch upon a few basic things for beginners, especially for those who are starting out with pottery and have these questions about glazes. So for glazes, if you're trying to show your texture, if you have a textured piece, my assumption is that you want the texture to come through. For such glazes, translucent celadon glazes work best. So all the different glaze companies will have a range which will say translucent or semi-transparent or celadon glazes. This will be there in the description. So just check those out before you go in to buy them. Amoco has their celadon range. Spectrum has their range of celadon glazes. They're not called celadons, they're called something else. But if you kind of read through the description, you will know what that particular glaze type is. At the same time, now if you want to do some all those melty effects on your pieces with different glazes combining and flowing together, for those I would recommend do it on a plain surface without texture, because that's where you'll be able to see all the glaze movement and things like that. If it's on a textured piece, for me at least, I feel it gets quite muddy or it gets kind of messed up unless it's softer colors. For example, now just as an example, I have this particular piece. Now here I have used a couple of different glazes and tried to get that melty effect, and you can see the texture also coming through and the glaze pooling in, and it's looking all right. But a lot of times, especially when you're at the beginning stages, I feel it gets a little bit tricky to get the desired result with these melty, thick glazes. Now, Amoco's Potter's Choice glazes, those are beautiful glazes and they look really great when you combine with different colors, with different couple of different glazes, and you see all those drips and melties and all of those happening. They're great, but I feel for texture, they kind of cover the texture almost entirely. With Spectrum, their floating range, these are also really beautiful melty glazes, but somehow they don't cover the texture completely. At least in my case, I do thin them down quite a bit. I add a little bit of water to them. So they're easy to apply, and I usually do just 2 coats. And for me, that works really well. These are actually soft white, 2 coats of blue rutile, 2 coats of sangria here, and then another coat of soft white. So with that, you can see some of the texture has been covered here. Right here you can see some of the texture is gone. So that can happen with, I feel, a lot with the Potter's Choice glazes. However, with the Spectrum floating range, um, once you've thinned it down and used only 2 coats, you get the desired color from the glaze, plus you see the texture as well. With Amoco, if you don't add sufficient coats, you don't see that color. For example, this rutile blue can turn really shitty brown if you don't use it thick enough. So those are those, I feel, for me, it's been a little bit of challenge using Potter's Choice for texture. Another thing, when you're applying something on a flat surface, if it's a thicker glaze, again, like the Potter's Choice or like the Spectrum floating range, those glazes will tend to cover the texture a lot. You won't see much of the variation. However, when it's on a vertical surface, I'll just give you an example. Here are a few examples. When it's on a vertical surface, because there's space for glaze to move, you will see all of this variation, with the colors and the drips and things happening. But if it's a flat surface, you won't see much of these mixing and all of these effects coming through. So I mean, it's kind of intuitive, but sometimes, especially when we're at the beginning of our journey, these are the things that we kind of miss. Third thing is the clay color. Now if you're using a white clay body, And with that, you're using your any of your glazes, especially the celadons. On a lighter clay body, the celadons will come through. You will see them nice and bright. They look, they will give you the color that you see in images online on the website. However, if you do the same thing on a darker clay body, like this is a darker clay body, there are clay bodies which are darker than this as well. The effect will be very different. It will turn out to be slightly muddy. So celadons are like watercolors, right? I mean, the effect is like watercolors. They're not like watercolors, but the effect is like watercolors. If you do it on a darker base, the colors are not going to be as vibrant or bright. They're going to kind of, the clay underneath is going to show through. If it's on a white clay body, the colors are going to be a lot brighter and vibrant. So that is the difference with clay bodies. However, on these kind of clay bodies, I like to use all the floating glazes, especially my soft white. That's my favorite. That looks absolutely stunning. So soft white, pearl white, if you are in the white category, if you like the whites. Then they have sangria, kimchi. I think all of them, they look really, really pretty on both the clays. Again, the effect will be very different. The way they look will be very different. But I think they still look really pretty on darker clays as well. These are a few things that if you're a beginner, it's good to know. I think with that, we'll get started because we have a lot to glaze. So today we will be glazing the teardrop Tealight holder, which we made some time back, quite some time back, and these flower holders, flower votive holders, Tealight holders. Now here are a few examples I have of the colors that I've used. I have used others as well. Let me just show you some more. Here are all the different colors that I've done in the past. So yeah, you can see how different they look from where they started. So this is, I think, holly green, 2 coats, right, on this one. This is shadow blue from Clayscapes. Okay, this is holly green from Spectrum. This is shadow blue from Clayscapes. This was a dip and pour glaze. Okay, this is coral, beautiful glaze, and a little bit of, I think, running hot chowder or soft white here on the rim. Right, that's one option. This one is weeping plum from Amico. This is again, I have the dip and pour version, so it was easy to just quickly dip and get it done. So these are the options which I've done in the past, and they all look quite pretty. I mean, you can pick any of these colors. But last year, I did mostly these 2 combinations for a corporate order, which was soft red from Spectrum, soft white from Spectrum, soft white from Spectrum, and soft red here. So these are the 2 combinations that I did in this version. Now the thing is, the way these are fired for glazing, I fire them like this. So the back has to be absolutely clean of glaze. There's no glaze at the back because this sits on the shelf like this, and it has to sit flat, otherwise it can warp and go a little bit out of shape. And for that, what happens is that you have to wipe the flower off. So you see this clay showing through at the back. So the back side will always have this issue. What you can do is take some acrylic paint after it's all done, mix this kind of pink, whitish pink, and add that to the back. You can do that and cover it. It's an additional step you will have to do with this. When we're using this combination where soft red is on the outside and the flower inside is white, even if there's no color at the back here, it doesn't look that odd. I mean, it looks like it's still part of the flower. It doesn't look too off. I mean, obviously, if you see it carefully, you can see that it doesn't have any glaze and it's a rough surface. So is this. That's the thing with these. So when you're making these, it's a good idea to make sure this sits flat at the back. Your flower isn't kind of jutting out from the back. And I think this is a better combination in the sense that at least you can see we can get the flower white and get away with this looking, a little unpolished. So that's a difference. That's how it looks, right? This is a little bit of a problem, I feel, and I don't like this look particularly, given that you can see the clay underneath. Even this one, you can see, but it's not that obvious as obviously it is in this one. So these are the options. I think today I'm going to go, because we have this one, I'm going to go with this combination, soft red on the outside and soft white on the inside in the flower. Okay, that's the plan for the Tealight holder. Now for the flowers, I want to show you a few options. This is cranberry from Spectrum. It's a really sweet translucent pink glaze. This is again the same combination here, soft red, 2 coats all over, and then soft white just at the rim, 2 coats. Okay, This one was soft white, 2 coats, and then I added a little bit of soft red on the rims. But you can see, I don't know if you can see, can you see this little bit of red coming through here? Little bit of this red coming through here. So the soft red, when it's put on top of soft white, it kind of just disappears. So if you look at it like this, you'll see hints of red here, like pink here, but not much. So for me, again, the preferred combination is this because you can at least see the colors. So we'll do one each for both of these. So that is a plan. Oh, and while you're here, let me show you a few other options here that I have done. Now this is also cranberry, but I've added mother of pearl on top and fired again. So can you see that extra glow on this? It's so pretty. So cranberry with mother of pearl looks really pretty. Okay, this is, I think, I did really thick coats of holly green, and I did something similar with shadow blue as well, and it looked stunning. I don't have that here in my studio anymore, but you could do it in other colors also. It doesn't always have to be just, pink. Here's another one. This is a white glaze from Clayscapes. What is it called? It's a beautiful white cream. It's called cream. Yes, it's nice multi glaze, and I use that very thin coat. But if you see, the clay is different. The clay is a darker clay. So you see all this texture kind of comes through, looks quite pretty. So that is another option. Now this one is interesting. This was actually an accident. My kiln was supposed to fire to 1200 degrees, and it went all the way up to, I think, 1250, I think. And because of that, you'll see all of these beautiful variations that happen. So this was soft red with soft white on the rims, same combination as I showed you earlier. But what happened here was that because it went to higher temperature, the soft white kind of started showing these bluish color kind of came through. I think this is my favorite of the three, but I would not repeat it because thankfully it wasn't a disaster, but it can happen. So you can see how beautiful this looks. You get a little bit of blue in the soft white when it's gone to this temperature. And this is again my white clay. So it's not the clay body, it's just that firing it to high temperature led to these blue tones coming through under the soft white. So those are a few other combinations. Let me show you another beautiful piece just to illustrate what happened. So this is another, this is a high fire clay body, this one. So this did fire to 1250 degrees, and here I had used Mako Coral on the inside, and on the rims I had just used soft white 2 coats. And you can see what soft white looks like. It's almost turned blue on even this white clay body. And similar thing happened here as well, though you can't see much of, as much blue here because the petals are kind of small, but this is what this kind of blue kind of comes through at 1250 with soft white on a white clay body. I don't know if having a little bit of pink in the base makes a difference, but that's a soft white on at 1250 degrees. So here are my glazes. Now you do see them in a different box than probably the regular pine jars because I buy them, both these soft white and soft red. I get them in that gallon bucket, and then I kind of keep scooping some out in smaller bottles and using them. Now I haven't used them in a while. I haven't really glazed in a really long time. So I'm going to first quickly check if they are in the right consistency for me to glaze. So I'm going to just take the back of my brush and mix it up just to see how thick this is. Okay. I'm just dipping my brush in water. This is a Mako number 8 fan brush. Okay, mixing it up just to kind of get a sense of how thick or thin this is. I think this is a good consistency. Yeah. So I kind of, this has to be like cream, like thin cream consistency that I like. Sometimes it's thicker. So then I thin it down with a little bit of water, but this is the consistency. See, it has to spread easily on the surface. That's the main consideration. So this looks good to me for now. Okay, let's check the soft white as well. Again, I'm mixing it with my brush to see how thick or thin this is. Yeah, I think this also looks good. Yeah, you can see it's kind of, yeah, I think we are good here. This is just something that I've learned, as you kind of work with different glazes, you kind of understand what consistency they work better at, best at. And this is something which you learn over time. It's not something that I can tell you this is exactly how it's going to work for you as well. So just be aware that you have to do a little bit of, practical yourself to understand how different glazes behave on your clay and the way you fire. So it's always a bit of a learning process, and it will differ for everyone. So I'm taking my flour here, let's do the flour first, and cleaning this off with a damp sponge because this has been sitting out on the shelf for a very long time. So trying to get rid of the dust. So I'm doing white here with a little bit of soft red. Let's see if that works. So again, I'm just using my fan brush, dipping it in my glaze. If you see, my brush is loaded with glaze. I don't, scrape it off on the edge like this. I will usually just go with this. That's why I like to use slightly thinner glazes so that, it's not too much. And just take this and go over the surface of your piece. And you can keep spreading the glaze so long as your surface is still wet. The moment it dries out, you can stop pushing the glaze around because then it won't really work. Again, I'm just making sure that the surface is nicely, and I keep dipping in my glaze, making sure there's a nice even coat. Everything is nicely covered. So that's my first coat on the inside. Now I'm going to start on the outside here. You can see, just making sure with one brush load I get at least a couple of petals. Okay, then we come on the outside, and here I'm going to be a little bit more careful. I'm going to start at the top, make sure these are nicely covered. Okay, here I'm using a little less glaze because of these flowy glazes and how much they melt and flow. I'm being a little bit more careful. Now this is almost my second coat on here, and now what I'll do is the rest of the brush, whatever little is left, I'll just try and put this on the back here. Not going to do more than that because of the way this glaze behaves, right? So now with your second coat, wait for the first coat to dry completely and then go in with the second coat. Otherwise, you're just pushing the same glaze on the clay surface and it's not going to really cover anything. So again, while the surface is still wet, I can keep brushing it to avoid the brush strokes. Though I have to say with these floating glazes, soft white, soft red, and the other floating glazes from Spectrum, you don't really see much streaking, to be honest, because they melt so well. They have their own amazing effects that you see on the clay surface that you don't really see the streaks. I think this becomes a problem mostly when you're using a Celadon glaze. Just going a little bit here on the tip, just for the flowers here. And then making sure all the edges are also covered. Sometimes you tend to miss those. Okay. Now we wait for this to dry before we head in with the soft red. Okay. Because the second coat's going to take a little bit longer to dry. Now coming to this one. And honestly, adding this little foot at the back helps to hold on to the piece a little easier. I think it's just easier to hold it on. Though you can still slip. It's not very secure, but it gives you a little bit of place to kind of hold on to. Okay. Again, I'm going to dip my brush in the glaze, load it up. Okay. Just taking a little bit of excess off here, and then I keep brushing on the surface till I am able to cover it. Okay. But again, not too much. Just making sure I'm covering all of the backs of all of these petals. Then we go on to the outer layer. And you have to wiggle the brush in, like go in with a little bit of a dabbing motion so that you're able to get through to the inside of the petal and you don't have any, glaze free area there because you want it to be nicely covered. Otherwise, that white patch will show through. So make sure you get all the little nooks and corners and crannies and everything. Okay. Now I'm going outside of the second layer, making sure I get a nice even, at least a nice coat on the outside here. Okay. And then on to the third layer, going petal by petal. And if you see, I am going up and down with my brush in line with the texture, the petal texture here. That just helps to cover the surface a little better. Okay, now this is done. Now we start looking at the back. Again, I'm going to do the same thing, just add it here, the glaze. Okay, add the tips. My fly is getting heavy, it may just drop and break. Here's my second coat. Okay, now if you want, you can just place it here, and then with a little bit of glaze, just go around. And I'm going to do just one coat here for this part at least. Now, to be honest, with the way I have thinned down my glaze, it should not uh, really melt so much, but sometimes what happens is there is glaze pooling in certain areas, and that becomes so thick that it starts to flow through. So just have to be careful of those things. Now I can see a few areas. Can you see this white little spot inside? I can see those few areas. So what you can do is, for these kind of things, have a smaller brush. If it's a smaller brush, take that and cover it in. Okay. Good thing is I have another coat to go, so I don't have to worry so much about it. So I'm going to go in with my second coat. Second coat, applying is much faster because your clay is not as dry and not as thirsty and is not sucking all the glaze out. You already have a little bit of moisture back in the clay with the first coat, so it's a little bit easy to kind of brush on the glaze second time around, but it takes longer to dry. Okay, we're almost done here. Okay, and I'm going to give another little bit of a thing here. Coat, just add the top of the petals right here. Okay, there you go. So that's done. Now to add the white, the soft white, we'll have to wait till it dries before we add the soft white. Okay, in the meantime, let's get on to the teardrop Tealight holder. Again, I'm going to first clean up the flower, the entire piece actually, with a damp sponge. Okay, so here also we are doing soft red and then soft white on the flower. So I'm going to start with the outside so that if there's any excess I can wipe off and then go with into the flower. Again, using my same brush, just holding it this way. My hand, I'm going to first do the outside. Just remember which side is going to be flat. This side is flat, it's going to sit on the kiln shelf, so have to be careful. You can see I'm not being very liberal with my glaze here. Okay, so with soft white and soft red, as I mentioned earlier, even if I'm not very uniform with my brush strokes, you can get away with it. Okay, now if instead of this you were using Holly Green, or if you were using some Celadon from Amico, or any of the Celadon translucent glazes, then you would have to be a lot more careful because then the streaks would show. Waiting for that to dry a little bit. It's almost dry because the first coat, like I said, doesn't take too long. So we do this and then go back again. So I keep brushing and spreading the glaze till my surface is still damp, is still wet. The moment it starts to dry up, I just pull the brush away, load up my brush, and then come back again. Okay, this and then this. All right, done. Now we want this clean, so I'm going to leave it there for a second because I need to focus on the inside. Now we're going to do the inside. Almost dry. I'm not using too much glaze here because there's not too much surface for this to really move. So if it melts too much, flows, it can go all the way to the kiln shelf. And I've had many such disasters with this piece. So I'm just taking again the same thing, taking the brush and going over the clay surface. Now as we get closer to the flower, I'm being a little bit more careful, but don't worry because again with this glaze and soft white, even if there's a little bit of transfer, it won't really matter much. Okay, you can load up the brush and then there you go. Okay, I think this is the back. Okay, never mind. Now we've done both sides, one coat. Outside I've done 2 coat, inside I've done 1 coat. I haven't really finished this, but here if you see in the front, now I'm going to just add this 1 coat on the top here and around the flower. I'm using the same brush. You can use a smaller brush if this bothers you. If you're not comfortable with a big brush, I'm okay. I just make sure that I don't see any of the white of the clay there. That's all. Okay. So once I've done this side, then I turn around. This is the side which is going to go on the kiln shelf and we'll clean it up. But for now, just make sure that you have glaze covering all of this. Okay. And since we've done only 1 coat here, I'm going to go in with the 2nd coat. Okay. Here, if you see, I'm not using the glaze that liberally, this particular glaze, because it's melty. If you're using a Celadon again, please, load up your brush and don't do this tricky thing that I'm doing. I don't know if it's clear. I hope it is. Okay, now I'm going to start cleaning up. First, I'll start with the back. Clean up all of this glaze here. Now, if you're using a dip and pour glaze, you're kind of dipping this in a bucket of glaze. In that case, I would say add a layer of wax here and here, and then dip, so that it's easy to clean up. But okay, now when I'm cleaning these glazes, my melty glazes, I will leave a little bit of this margin here to give the glaze to move a little bit, room for the glaze to move a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to, if you see, create a clean line here, just with my sponge, damp sponge. Just go around, make sure there's a little bit of clean area for the glaze to move a little bit. It looks neat. At the same time, gives it some space to move as well. Okay, and then I'm gonna just clean off these petals at the back because you can see a lot of the pink here. Whatever you can clean, you can just do it here. Same on this side, but remember, with soft white, once the soft white comes on top, you won't really see much of the soft red. Okay, and clean my hands. And for this, ideally, I think I will move to a different brush. So I'm using one of these brushes, bamboo brushes. They're nice and absorbent and have a smaller tip, but they still can hold a lot of glaze. So they're really good for glazing, I think. So I'm going to use this and I'm going to start on the inside. You see that? Yeah. Okay. So I'm first doing the petals from the inside, making sure everything is covered. Again, you can see I'm not being very particular about my strokes with this glaze. That's why I like using these glazes for these kind of projects. Okay, so that's 1 coat done on the inside. I think I'll do another coat before I go on to the outside. So as it dries, I'm doing another coat. That's my 2nd coat done. Okay, let's focus on the outside. Again, with this kind of brush, it's easier to focus on a smaller area and create slightly neat strokes. Okay, with these 2 glazes, this combination, what happens is I can get away with a little bit of the colors transferring here and there. For example, I have a few spots of soft white that I dabbed here while I was brushing on the inside. It doesn't bother me so much because with these glazes, it's okay. It doesn't show as much with just a little bit of a dab. If it was a Celadon glaze, a translucent glaze, it may be a little bit of a problem. So again, for what kind of glazes you use for what kind of projects is also this can be a consideration that how painful it's going to be to glaze a piece. Something like this, I think these glazes work well. Okay, so that's my 2nd coat. I know I've added it at the back. Now, once I've done this, just to make sure this is the part which is going to sit flat on the shelf, right? So what I'm going to do is just take my damp sponge and clean off those areas which are going to sit on the shelf, right? Can you see that cleaned off? That's it. That's all I have to clean because this is the area which is going to touch the kiln shelf and the rest of this. So that's all I'm going to clean. And you need to go in with another round of soft white, you can do that. I'm just doing it at the tips a little bit. Okay, just making sure I'm not leaving any of the rims without glaze. That's all. Okay. All right, so that is done. That's our 2 coats of both the glazes done. Now, sometimes what will happen is you'll see these little holes in the surface, especially when the texture is kind of deep. Uh, what I've noticed with, again, the floating range is that this doesn't really make a difference, doesn't really lead to any kind of pinholes or anything. But if it still bothers you, what you can do is, once the glaze has completely dried, only after the glaze completely dried, just with your finger, go over the surface. So what you're doing is you are rubbing the glaze, creating glaze powder, and you're pushing that powder through these little holes here, so they fill up the holes. Okay, this can be effective if you're facing issues with glaze skipping the clay surface and all. So I just do this wherever I see these little holes. Okay, there you have it. And you will see it only usually in the textured areas, not on the plain surface, the plain areas. Okay, there you go. So that is done. One more time, I'll have a look at this. Take my damp sponge, clean damp sponge, clean the rim here, clean this, make sure there's nothing here, and that is ready to now fire like this. Okay, let's now come back to this. This is a soft white 2 coats done. Before I add to the rims, I'm going to just take my sponge and clean off the base just in case, and around the base a little bit to get rid of any clay there. Okay, now we'll focus. I think for this we can use a smaller brush. This is too small. Let's just use this guy. This is too big for this, but yeah. So I'm going to just dab this on the rims here, a little bit under, like this. This is coat number 3 overall, if you see on this piece. So this is going to take even longer to dry. Okay, so we have to wait to add the last coat of soft white on this, soft red on this. Oh god, I keep mixing the two up. Okay, there you go. All right, so now we wait for this to dry and then we go in with one more coat. In the meanwhile, let's get this guy here. Again, I'm using the bamboo brush. Use this and dab it all over. I think for this I'm going to go with just one coat because soft white will show through this most likely. Going on the back as well, just at the tips. I'm not trying to cover the entire petal. And again, I'm not being very precise also. I'm just going dab, 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 dab. That's it. I think I'm going to stick to just one coat of soft white on this. And we will see what happens. And then just going on the outside here. Okay. So there you have it. This one I'll wait for a little bit longer for the soft red to dry. Is it dry? Let's see. It looks kind of dry. Let's go in with one more. The last one. So if you see, I'm just slapping it on here. Not even trying to brush, just dab, 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 dab. Okay, I think we're good. So that's it. That's how we glaze these. These will be fired to cone 5-6, which is around 1200 degrees Celsius in my kiln. That's all I have for you this week. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, glazing tutorial, and I'll see you next week with another, either a tutorial or a kiln opening. Let's see if I'm able to fill up the kiln. In any case, I'll see you next week. Bye for now.